Welcome to Beyond Disruption, where you'll learn how emerging tech is changing the world of accounting, business, and finance. Our guest experts break down the latest news in everything from blockchain to robotics, artificial intelligence to human intelligence. Tune in to find out how you can stay ahead of the curve.
Hello, welcome to the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, a weekly series from the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. From our London office, I'm Kyle Hannon. This week's episode is called More Than Just Data Analytics, Growing a Conventional Business in an Unconventional World. Every week, we sit down with an internationally respected guest whose insights will help you, your team, or your company prepare to turn today's disruptions into tomorrow's opportunities. Helping us do just that, CFO of Afrimat, Pieter de Wit. Hello, Pieter. Where are you today?
Hello, Kyle. I'm joining you here from sunny Cape Town, here in South Africa.
One of the world's most spectacular cities, and I should know because, by coincidence, it's also my hometown. So it's really lovely to be talking to you there. For those people who may know a little about you, the reason we are connecting is because you are a speaker in one of the finance transformation conferences in South Africa. We'll be talking about the changing role of finance. And you know all about that because you've spent 16 years as a senior manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers. You're an experienced financial director with a demonstrated history of working in the mining and metals industry. You're skilled in negotiation, cash flow, business planning, internal audits, and GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles. You're a strongly experienced finance professional with a Master of Business Administration, which focused in BizAd and management from Stellenbosch University, just outside Cape Town. As I said, you'll be speaking at the AICPA and CIMA's forthcoming Finance Transformation Conference in Johannesburg. And your session will be focused on the role of modern finance in supporting and advancing the business. So let's start there. How does a growing company make the change to a new automated process? What are some of the basics that you start with? And then what do you do to make sure that it all goes to plan?
When I joined Afrimat in 2008, it was about 12 months to 18 months after our listing. And at that stage, we had a lot of privately held companies that formed a newly listed entity called Afrimat. And at that stage, we had a lot of different accounting packages. So our first plan was to get one single universal platform throughout the group. So our first step was to implement a consolidated ERP system for the entire business. We didn't follow a big bang approach. We rather took it one business unit at a time and one process at a time. For example, we took one company in the group, we implemented the sales and debtors module, and once that was bedded down and the proper change management was done, we started with the next process. So initially that process was taking quite a long time because we did it with in-house resources, but towards the end of the process, we added more resources in order to fast-track that process. And I can proudly say that we do have an ERP system now running throughout the group.
And it's certainly a fascinating group. In fact, you've worked to incorporate those new processes you were talking about, as well as technology and some interesting example of best practices, specifically in the context of developing markets. So before we discover what those processes and practices actually are, can you start with a quick overview of Afrimat? What's its business? What specifically do you do to help your company improve what it does?
Afrimat is a diversified mid-tier open miner. Our products are sold into three main industries. Firstly, we sell stone, sand and concrete products into the construction sector. Then secondly, we sell industrial minerals such as limestone, dolomite and silica to the industrial industry. And thirdly, we sell iron ore, mainly to the China steel manufacturing industry. Furthermore, Afrimat is also a JSE listed company with a market cap of 3.8 billion rand. And my role in the company is mainly to assist our CEO with the strategy of the company in order to ensure that we maintain our growth path and to understand the risks in the business. I also have a big role to play in the company to continuously focus on cost throughout the business.
And the way you're doing that is quite interesting because it's not simply a changing market, but it's one that is being constantly disrupted. And here at the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, we talk to new experts every week. Disruption itself is not new. It's a constant. Things have always been changing. So in the context of the work that you've told us you do, what was the last big disruption that you saw in the profession, perhaps with your time at PwC? What happened to those companies you saw that failed to adapt? How did it change the organizations you were working with, either for better or worse?
The biggest change that I experienced in my career, and it's not only at PwC, it's at Afrimat as well, is the move towards near to real-time information. The days where it was okay to report your month-end figures a month after or at the next month-end, that days are gone. Business executives need information quickly in order to react to the quickly changing environment. From my experience, those businesses that do not react quickly, they will fall behind other businesses or competitors, and they might even end up eventually in not surviving the new environment.
And when you talk about not surviving, do you mean that business initiatives would be less than successful, or have you seen companies fail completely?
I've seen companies completely losing their business, going into liquidation. I've seen companies going into business rescue. To give you an example, the iron ore business that we bought was a business that entered business rescue. And during the due diligence process, we identified one of the issues was that they didn't have information on a timely basis. So when the iron ore price went south, the iron ore price is market driven. When that iron ore price went south, the company didn't react and they entered business rescue as a result. More examples are some of our construction companies. The current economic environment has changed. Government has been spending money on smaller projects. And some of the bigger construction firms hasn't changed their strategies. Some of them have gone into liquidation and has fallen away.
So those are real consequences which are sourced directly in issues around the disruption we're talking about. Information, data, and it becoming vitally important to get that data in a much more timely fashion. But it's also in an incredibly complex environment. So just to remind people that Afrimat Limited, your company, is a leading black-empowered open pit mining company. It provides construction material, industrial minerals. It's a very, very complex chain that you've got to keep an eye on. And you've obviously been doing a good job because, as you said, it is listed on the main board at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I believe it's under construction and building materials sector. And it's backed by more than 45 years of experience and working across urban and rural South Africa. Afrimat services projects of any scale. So even though you mentioned government may be focusing on smaller projects, you serve major infrastructural and construction projects for state-owned enterprises as well as parastatals right through to those small private sector contracts you were talking about. So people would be listening to this and they say, well, that sounds conventional, it sounds familiar, but there are some unique realities which are fundamental to the Southern African business environment, which many in our profession in other parts of the world may find surprising. Let's start with this. What exactly is a black empowered business, and how does that feed into the way a business can develop not only itself, but also how it can develop the wider community it operates in?
Black empowered means that you have black people holding more than 26% of your shareholding. This ownership requirement is not the only requirement for a mining license in South Africa. It is also required for a BEE scorecard, and you need a BEE scorecard to do business with government in South Africa. But apart from only shareholding or ownership structures that you need to have in place, There's also other requirements to do business in South Africa. These are requirements for procurement, skills development, employment equity, and social development. And in order for businesses to be sustainable, you need to collaborate with all your stakeholders. At Afrimat, genuine transformation is important to us, and genuine transformation starts with your own staff and then extends to the communities that you operate in. You need to maintain collaborative relationships with all your stakeholders. In addition to that, environmental responsible mining is also a pivotal element of Afrimat's strategy.
And as we're looking at how a conventional business can grow in a fairly unconventional environment, let's also talk about something that many of our listeners will take for granted, and that is a high level of infrastructural provision, utilities, reliable power supplies, telephone and communications and data lines. You can't have data moving from one part of a country or business to another unless you've got a way for that data to be transferred. That is not a given in Southern Africa. So you've been using technology in a very low-tech or sometimes a no-tech environment. And when there's no reliable infrastructure, what is the alternative? Talking of unconventional environments, what are the challenges to this effective data automation which are posed by the realities of the South African market? And how might the solutions you've discovered be applicable in other parts of the world?
In our environment, considering that with our new ERP system, we've got central service that's situated in Cape Town, and we need all our sites, which is located all over South Africa and in Mozambique at the moment. We need them to communicate on a daily basis or on a regular basis, but basically be live to our servers. So our biggest concern or biggest issue that we have is the connectivity. Our sites are remotely located, and it's not always easy to get them linked to our servers. But there are all kinds of alternatives to get them linked to our servers, but you have to follow an entrepreneurial approach. To give you an example, in the Northern Cape, where the our iron ore mine is situated, we struggled with connectivity and link to our servers. There's no cell phone towers nearby, so we had to install our own infrastructure in that area. So we eventually reached an agreement with a cell phone provider or a data provider in that area, where we've paid for the infrastructure. We erected a cell phone tower, but as part of that deal, we got preferential rates for the data usage on a monthly basis from that service provider.
As a finance professional, as a chief finance officer, how do you account for that in a company's books? What kind of categorization do you give that type of expense? Because that's not something that the average business would have to take into account in their books. So how do you do that?
You have to follow the principles of IFRS in accounting for this type of transaction. If you spend a lot of money on infrastructure, you have to capitalize that in your accounts. It is something that's part of your normal day-to-day, is to look where you can get connectivity. So it forms part of your capital budget and your plans going forward in your business. So you have to capitalize it, and then the monthly data fees, you account for it in terms of your normal expensing rules.
Well, that's certainly not something that many companies working at this level in Europe or some of the more developed markets in the world would normally have to factor into the way that they deliver the processes inside their business. So that's fascinating. Before we continue, just a quick note. This podcast is part of the Go Beyond Disruption initiative. It's brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. You can find more details at aicpa-cima.com/disruption. We'll put that link in our show notes. You'll also find links in the show notes to the AICPA store and the CGMA store, websites which you may already be using, and you can go to those sites for courses, webinars, and more professional development resources around this and many other related topics. Let's get back to our conversation about how to grow a conventional business in an unconventional environment. Pieter, you were saying that there are some things that you have to focus on. We've talked about how automating data, how transferring of information can rely on infrastructure. When it's not there, you have to make sure it's installed. But there are some things that technology can't fix. There are some processes that can't be automated. And this is a reality for businesses in many parts of the world. It may be something that many of our listeners won't have experience of. And this is something that you have already focused on. It's absolutely crucial to the way that you, as a company in Southern Africa, are able to continue to do business. And that is learning how to manage your relationships with private and public bodies, even with government. Why is that so important? What's at stake?
I agree with you, Carl. There are things that you can't automate. Some of those things are business experience and your relationships with your stakeholders. Relationships is with people. There will always be people in your business. The roles might change, but there will always be people, and you need to maintain strong relationships with each and every stakeholder, such as your customers, your suppliers, your staff, your communities in which you operate, and the government. And a breakdown in a relationship with any one of these stakeholders can have catastrophic consequences for the business. For example, if you look at your employees, if you don't have a good relationship with your employees, and this is the case in South Africa, there are a lot of business that experience strikes and violent strikes where people burn down equipment. In order to limit that risk, you need to have a good relationship with your employees. You also need to have a good relationship with the government, especially for us at Afrimat. We get a mining license for each and every mine that we have. And we have in excess of 40 mining licenses. And for us to maintain those mining licenses, we need to have a good relationship with the government. If there's a breakdown with the government and we don't comply with all the requirements that they have, we might lose a mining license, and that will be the end of the business if you lose your mining license because you can't operate then.
Understanding and working within a context that goes beyond just the data that you're working with. It's about more than the information, the cold, hard facts. And the people, the communities, the political realities of your environment is a reality that many people, I think, would be surprised to hear can actually still form an opportunity rather than a threat. What are some practical steps that businesses are taking right now to understand how changes like this can become opportunities?
To link this question that you have with the previous one, to talk about an opportunity. Currently in South Africa, there's a lot of talks around a new mining charter. That new mining charter was now promulgated, and there was a lot of conversation and around what the mining charter and the requirements of the new mining charter. And there was a lot of people that had a lot of negative comments, and we at Afrimat, we took a different approach, and we saw the opportunity to influence the government in a positive way. Rather than criticize, we came up with a lot of solutions, especially for junior miners and smaller entities, on how to comply with the mining charter. And a lot of those comments was incorporated in the new mining charter, so that it shows you that even a smaller listed company like Afrimat can have an influence on government and what is incorporated in the government if you have a more collaborative approach rather than just criticizing or a negative approach. To discuss other opportunities, the economic environment of any business is changing constantly, and it's changing continuously. In order to cope with those changes, you need to gear your business to adapt quickly to a change in the environment. And to do that, you need experienced and capable staff, and you need a collaborative culture in order to stimulate innovation and entrepreneurial thinking, to get that solution, that innovative solution that is required. We have a saying in Afrimat, never waste a good crisis, and we always live by that. There's always an opportunity in a crisis, and that is what we teach our staff, that they need to look through the crisis and identify those opportunities. If a business is waiting for the economic environment to change back to the way they operate, they're not going to make it, because the environment changes and you need to adapt to that. The culture of the business is essential, and that is guided by the executive management who's spending a lot of time traveling to our operations, whether it's big or small, to ensure that our message and strategies are in place, that we live this saying of never waste a good crisis.
So with every crisis, you say there's an opportunity to either survive and thrive or to miss the opportunity and, well, go south. Let's get ahead of the curve and look at the next disruption. Obviously, there are all sorts of things around the corner, but what's one big change that you think lies ahead, and how do you recommend we get ready for it as team leaders or heads of finance divisions who may be working to support and advance our business in unconventional times?
Yeah, if you look at the finance function, it will become more and more automated. In that case, we'll have a big impact on the capturing of transactions and the reporting of financials. That will become more and more an automated process. To be a finance professional, it will become more and more important to become a business partner or not only report on historical figures. It's like driving a car. You need to look through the front window to see what's coming to the business, the risks that the business is facing, where the business is heading, in order to provide advice to your business partners. You can't just look in the rear view mirror and tell your business partners what happened. That is historical information. They cannot change the heading of the business by looking at those information. In order to be an effective business advisor, you will have to use data analytics, analyze the data of the business, looking at where the company is going, and use things like predictive analytics effectively, like forecasting what your revenues will be, forecasting what your expenses are going to be, to try and give some indication to your business partners of where this business is heading.
And also, as you've made very, very clear, your business partner may not necessarily be your direct client. They may be the communities which your business does business in, where it's physically located, the wider society, which can be changed by government legislation. So you have to make sure that you're adopting a collaborative but intuitive engagement with the state, as well as the people that may or may not be your own direct clients. So it's quite fascinating, certainly moving beyond the data, but retaining your intelligence over and beyond what you see directly on the screen in front of you. Now, for anyone who'd like to find out more about the topic of going beyond data analytics, being a conventional business in an unconventional world, perhaps people who want to find out more about your work in particular, where would you recommend that they look?
I would recommend that they firstly look at Afrimat's website, afrimat.co.za. Our work is on there, our annual report. I've got a CFO report on an annual basis that I include in the annual report, which is also available on our website. Yes, and our contact details are also on our website. So if people are more curious on the topic, they're welcome to give me a call as well.
Well, that's all we have time for at the moment, Pieter. But before we wrap up, what's one message you'd like to leave for those of our listeners in the accounting and finance profession that will help them go beyond disruption?
My one message is that accounting skills and analytical skills is not the end. It's not the only skills that you need. It's only the base. To be an effective finance professional, you need some softer skills, leadership skills to add to your accounting skills. As companies grow and the business environment is becoming more and more complex, there's more legislation coming in, you have to rely on a team of people. You can't do everything on your own. You don't have the knowledge of all the legislation that's facing the business. You don't have the relationships with all your stakeholders. You need to rely on a team. And to manage a team effectively, you need to have good leadership skills and good interpersonal skills. Lastly, remember that financial figures are the result of decisions. And you need to be involved in the decision if you want to influence the financial figures.
And of course, we'll make sure we include links to the resources you've mentioned in our show notes. So thank you very much, Pieter. There's obviously much more to explore around the topic of growing a conventional business in this unconventional world. And in addition to the resources you've mentioned, we'd also like to recommend two other websites for additional material: the AICPA store.com/Go Beyond Disruption, or if you use the CGMA Store website, cgmastore.com/disruption is where you'll find courses, webinars, and more professional development resources to help you take this topic further. Talking of exploring further, you can find all of our previous episodes as well as new episodes every week. They go straight to your mobile device or your computer, free, automatic. Just subscribe via Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. In fact, whatever app you use to get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio in the US as well. We hope you got something useful from this episode with Pieter de Wit from Afrimat in Cape Town. Feel free to pass on the episode, share the podcast with a friend, a colleague, or with anyone in your network who'd enjoy it too. I'm Kyle Hannon. I'm from the London office of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon with more insights that help you and your profession to go beyond disruption. Until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the AICPA or AICPA.org. It is provided with the understanding that the AICPA and AICPA.org are not engaged in offering legal, accounting, or other professional service. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The AICPA and AICPA.org make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to, and assume no responsibility for, the content or application of the material contained herein, and especially disclaim all liability for any damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material. Such material. Such material. Such material.